Look at you, already in tears. 35 miles is hardly anything. Maybe the rain will wash that attitude away. My father's tone was light, almost playful, like he was teasing a child instead of deserting his daughter on a county road with no shoulder and a sky splitting open. A droplet slid down my nose. Then a curtain followed, cold, sharp, unrelenting. Gravel at the asphalt's edge turned to mush, swallowing my shoes as if the earth wanted me erased. Headlights flickered far off, indifferent. My breath smoked, my hands trembled. My phone sat dead in my pocket, a planned cruelty. He'd ensured that no charge, no wallet, just a lesson. I didn't run after the lights. I didn't plead. I watched those red dots shrink until they vanished, like a door closing on a room I had lived in forever. My name is Marin Vale, and I mastered stillness long ago. The kind of stillness that convinces others you're fine when your ribs are a cage rattling with a storm. I grew up under rules that shifted like goalposts, affection twisted with control, apologies that always arrived with strings attached. So when he said I needed a lesson, I already knew the syllabus. Shame, fear, silence, and survival by not letting him see me crack. Rain stung my scalp. I could taste static in the metallic drops. I stepped beneath a lonely billboard for a storage company, its cartoon key smiling wide. The paint bled down its face like smeared mascara. Night pressed in around me. Frogs croaked in the ditch, like a cruel joke. Wind combed the grass, lifting my hair. His car was gone. The quiet after cruelty never feels quiet. It hums. I thought of every time he'd said, "Strong women don't complain," and how he labeled any boundary as whining. I thought of his laughter whenever I said no, like my mouth had mispronounced a smaller word. I pictured him at home, warm and smug, telling my mother I'd return softened, reduced, grateful. That's when the black truck rolled onto the shoulder, slow and steady, tires whispering on wet gravel. The door opened and a tall figure stepped into the rain, coat unshaken, posture unyielding. "Miss Vale," he said calmly. "Ready. Let's go." I climbed in without wiping my face. Heat wrapped around me like a steady hand. In the mirror, the storm carved white scars across the road like tally marks. My father believed in lessons. Now he'd enrolled in mine. The last course. No retakes. Graded with mercy I no longer owed. The door closed and thunder rumbled like a judge's gavel. The heater's hum wrapped my bones like the blanket I'd never had from a mother's arms. Elias, my bodyguard, kept his gaze on the road, hands steady. His jaw was carved stone, unreadable, his silence intentional. He understood what my father never could. Not every wound asks for words. Some just need room to breathe. Water traced silver paths down the windshield, blurring the world. My heart still pounded to the rhythm of abandonment. Fast, broken, betrayed. I pressed my palm against the warm vent, chasing the shiver buried deep. "Did he really leave you here?" Elias asked quietly, as though he already knew but wanted me to own the truth. I nodded. My throat burned from swallowing too much. He didn't press. The miles slipped by. Headlights skimming wet fields, swollen ditches eating the night. Every turn felt like crossing more than land. It was years of silence, years of control, years of believing cruelty was just discipline sharpened. At a crossroads, Elias slowed. "Do you want to go home?" he asked. The word tore me in two. A house I knew by heart, but never a place that knew me. I turned to the glass. The storm's reflection stared back, fierce and cold. "No," I whispered for the first time. His gaze cut to me, and there wasn't pity in it. Only respect, the kind soldiers reserve for someone who has survived their own battles. He pressed harder on the gas. Somewhere behind us, my father was already rehearsing his tale of how he taught me a lesson. What he didn't know was that his voice had already faded, slipping into the background like rain fading from a rooftop. Because tonight, the daughter he tried to break had drafted her own syllabus. And the opening chapter began the second I said no. The truck pulled me forward, while for him time had already ended. The rain eased to a whisper, but the storm inside me kept roaring. Elias's headlights carved tunnels through the drenched night, each beam a rope tugging me farther from the man who believed he owned my soul. I sat stiff, fingers laced so tightly in my lap they ached from holding myself together. "Where do you want to go?" Elias asked, steady, as if no distance was too far. I thought of every place I once dreamed of escaping to: anonymous cities, apartments with locks I controlled, kitchens that smelled of bread instead of dominance. But tonight I wanted only one thing: distance. "Anywhere but there," I said. Elias gave a short nod, as though he had expected that exact answer. He veered toward the interstate, the tires humming a steady comfort. I watched the raindrops race down the glass. Behind me lived a man who believed abandonment was instruction, who thought daughters were clay to be sculpted by cruelty, who mistook silence for obedience. For years, I had allowed it. Tonight, he would learn how wrong he was. "Do you want me to call someone?" Elias asked softly. A bitter laugh scraped my throat. "Who?" "My mother, who would just tell me to be more patient with him. My brother, his mirror image?" There was no one. "Then there's me," Elias said. No theatrics, no promises. Just truth. Something shifted inside me. Not relief, not yet, but the faintest crack in the wall. I leaned back against the seat. The leather smelled faintly of damp earth and pine. My body released a breath I hadn't known I'd been holding for years. In the quiet, an image flickered. My father's face when he finally realized control had slipped from him like sand through his hands. That day was coming. And it wouldn't arrive with screaming or slammed doors, but the way this night had: quiet, certain, devastating. I shut my eyes. The road stretched ahead. My revenge had just taken its first inhale. By the time we reached the interstate, the rain had thinned to a silver mist. Streetlights appeared sporadically, halos glowing in fog. Each one felt like a checkpoint, whispering, "You are farther. You are freer." Elias drove like a man accustomed to danger trailing close, his eyes flicking to the mirrors. He didn't speak until my breathing steadied, as if waiting for my storm to calm before adding his voice. "What do you want to do, Marin?" he asked. The question sank deeper than it should have. For years, my responses had been scripted. What my father demanded, who he shaped me to be, how tightly he pressed me into his mold. To hear what he want almost hurt. I swallowed. I want him to feel what I felt tonight. Elias didn't flinch. "Left abandoned, small," I added, voice quiet but sharp enough to cut. I want him to understand that silence isn't power, it's emptiness. I want him to look around and realize there's no one left beside him. The engine purred. His grip on the wheel tightened, but he stayed silent. He understood. We passed a road sign. City limits, 12 miles. Its glow lingered in my chest like a vow. I pictured my father at home, drink in hand, bragging about tough love, laughing at the idea of me sobbing alone in the storm. He would never know the truth. I wasn't crying anymore. He thought he'd driven off, leaving me abandoned. But really, I had left him behind, 35 miles and a lifetime away. The storm outside was ending, but the one inside me was only beginning. And when it broke, he would face the lesson he had written for himself. The city lights stretched across the horizon like a chain of fire, each bulb glimmering against the soaked asphalt. Elias guided us toward the glow, steady as a man stepping into a story whose ending he already understood. I leaned my forehead against the cool glass, watching neon signs smear into streaks of color. For the first time in years, I wasn't being measured, judged, or controlled. I was only me, and the weight of that freedom nearly crushed me. We pulled into a quiet roadside diner, its red sign buzzing with half the letters dark. Inside, the scent of coffee and fried onions wrapped around me, simple, ordinary, healing. Elias slid into the booth across from me, posture exact, fingers interlaced. "Food first," he said. "Plan second." The waitress poured hot coffee, and I curled my hands around the cup, letting the warmth undo the chill my father had sown. Staring into the dark liquid, I whispered, "He'll twist it. By morning he'll say I stormed out, that I disrespected him." Elias's gaze met mine, unwavering. It doesn't matter what he says. What matters is what you do next. The words struck deep. I thought of every dinner table where his version drowned out mine, every story rewritten until I disappeared inside it. But this time, I held the truth, and the silence of being dismissed no longer scared me. "I want out," I said at last. Not just from the house, from his shadow. Elias nodded once, the kind of nod soldiers give when orders are clear. Then we make sure he never stands tall enough to cast it again. The rain had stopped. Beyond the fogged glass, the night cleared, a faint star piercing the thinning clouds. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about how far he had left me. I was thinking about how far I could go without him, and that distance would cut sharper than any blade. Dawn crept in softly, sky washed in pale gray and hesitant pink. I hadn't slept. Elias dozed an hour in the booth, but I sat awake, palms wrapped around my mug, tracing its rim like it held a map to my future. When his eyes opened, he looked at me as if he already knew the resolve written across my face. "You're ready," he said. Not a question. I nodded. I'm done letting him define me. But I don't want shouting or shattered doors. I want him to watch his world collapse piece by piece until he realizes I was the foundation the whole time. Elias leaned in. Then we use what he values most against him: respect, appearances, reputation. The word reputation sparked inside me. My father thrived on control, but he fed on admiration, the image of a strict, noble man who raised strong children. If that mask cracked before the right audience, he'd be left with nothing. We drove on as the city stirred awake. Commuters filling streets, bakeries lifting shutters, newspapers slapping wet pavement. I watched it all pass and felt myself sharpening. At a red light, Elias spoke again. "He thinks silence is your weakness. Show him it's your weapon." The thought anchored in me. Silence had been my prison, but it could be my revenge. Not rage, not arguments, but absence. My absence. My voice, finally telling the truth where it mattered. My refusal to play the part he'd written. When we pulled up to a small apartment complex, Elias turned toward me. "This can be your place. Papers, lease, protection, I'll take care of it. You just decide what to say when he comes looking." The weight of choice pressed close, but it didn't crush me. It felt like freedom disguised as fear. I stepped from the truck into crisp air, scented faintly with wet concrete and jasmine. I wasn't just 35 miles away anymore. I had shifted into a new orbit, and my father was about to understand what true emptiness felt like. The apartment is tiny, a single bedroom with chipped paint and a fridge that groaned like it was on its last breath. Yet to me, it was a kingdom, a place where walls didn't echo with his commands. A key that was mine alone. A silence that wasn't punishment but choice. Elias carried in a small box, clothes, papers, a spare phone already charged. "It's not much," he murmured, setting it down. "It's everything," I whispered back. My voice trembled, not from fear, but from the shock of breathing air no longer poisoned by his shadow. By the second day, the phone began to buzz. Unknown numbers, voicemails piling up with his voice. "Where are you? Come home. Don't humiliate me like this. You'll regret it." Each word dripped with entitlement. Less concern for me, more outrage at losing control. I didn't respond. That silence was my strength now. Slowly, I started speaking, carefully, quietly, to those who once treated him like a pillar. Relatives, old friends, colleagues from his club, even my aunt who'd stopped visiting years ago because of the tension in that house. I told them the truth. How he left me stranded 35 miles from home in a storm, no phone, no wallet, nothing but a lesson. Their silence told me all I needed. Respect doesn't survive truth. It crumbles beneath it. By week's end, whispers were moving. His once commanding voice was turning brittle. I knew because his messages shifted, from orders to bargaining, from threats to apologies that didn't know how to take shape. One night, Elias stood at the window, watching the street while I replayed the latest voicemail. My father's words were jagged, frantic. "He's unraveling," Elias said. I leaned against the counter, steady. Good. Let him feel the silence. Because silence wasn't emptiness anymore. It was a mirror, and in it, he was finally hearing his cruelty echo back. He thought he'd abandoned me. He never saw it was him being left behind. 2 weeks later, I stood before the house I once called mine. The paint looked dull, the windows dim, as though even the walls had absorbed his decline. Elias waited in the truck, giving me space. This moment belonged to me. I rang the bell. It took longer than ever for him to answer. When the door opened, he looked smaller, not in frame, but in spirit. His shirt was creased, his eyes rimmed with exhaustion. The man who once towered now seemed hollowed out. "Marin," he said, relief and anger tangled in his tone. "You've made your point. Come back. Let's put this behind us." I stepped across the threshold, but not inside. My voice was calm, deliberate. "Forget that you left me in the rain, 35 miles from home. You thought silence would shatter me, but it shattered you instead." He opened his mouth, but I didn't let him fill the space.
People know now.
They know who you are when no one's watching, and they're watching more closely than you imagine. His face drained of color, his authority slipping like sand through his hands. For the first time, he had no words. From my pocket, I pulled the spare key, the one he gave me years ago with a lecture about responsibility. I set it on the step, the metal striking the ground like a gavel. "This isn't my home anymore," I said. "And I'm not your lesson. You're mine." The words cut heavier than any scream could. I turned and walked back to the truck. Elias opened the door, and as I climbed in, I didn't look back. Through the windshield, I saw him gripping the doorway, swallowed by a silence that was now his alone. I breathed in the air, crisp, clean, and felt the storm inside me dissolve into something steady. Betrayal had shaped me, but it no longer defined me. He had wanted control. I gave him emptiness. He had wanted obedience. I gave him truth. And in that quiet, my freedom roared louder than his voice ever had.